Tuesday, and welcome to the MSL Lead Chronicles. It's a podcast on a mission in medical affairs and leadership. I'm Mary Morton, and along with my buddy, Chad Fellers, we're going to have casual talk about important topics and challenges in leadership. And we are so glad you're here. Stay tuned.
Hello, and welcome back to MSL Lead Chronicles. I am your host, Chad Fellers, joined by my wonderful sidekick, Mary, the fabulous Morton. We're actually back together, at least in the U.S. Mary, I know that you like to play around and add different posts and articles. I saw those kind of comments and Q&A sessions while I was halfway across the world. So I'm glad that you were able to keep things at bay as much as possible and not kick me out of a job by the time I got back. So thanks for at least sending me an invite to do this, because I absolutely cannot wait to have this conversation with our guest today. So how you been, Mary?
I've been good. I tried to replace you, but nobody wanted to take you up on it.
Take me up on it?
Take me up on replacing you. Because they think how hard you work. That's exactly.
And we are digressing already.
Yes.
So I don't know if the listeners like to listen to just this banter or they actually love the content that we bring with the leadership development component, which is what we're really going to talk about today with Ryan. I'm really excited. We've been on this journey, as you know, over the past several weeks, talking about kind of asking the deep questions. What do we want to do from personal development, professional development? Are we settling for things? Are we compromising our abilities based off of our current experiences? You know, where are we in our journey? And I think the listeners are going to absolutely love hearing Ryan's story. There's so many application points, et cetera. But before we even get into that, Mary, why don't you give us a little more introduction to Ryan and share a little bit about his journey before he gets into it as well?
Yes. Okay. I love this part. I always love the fact that I get to do the introductions. So I am thrilled to welcome Ryan Case, PhD, who is currently with Mitsubishi Tanabe as a medical director in neurology. He can be described also as an explorer and an adventurer, a husband and a father, and now also as an author. And I'm very excited to have him here. I mean, Symbio actually featured him, his book as on our book club a few months back. And we're going to kind of get into a little bit of that today. But his book is called Wild Happy. And I happen to have a copy of it right here. So you need to go pick it up, you guys. But so we're going to get into some of that and a little bit more.
I love it. Ryan, welcome. Thanks so much for joining us. Really can't wait to dig into it. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're gonna, as Mary said, we're gonna dive into the book and talk about some of the developments that have come as a result of how the book has been received. But before we get too far into that, Ryan, why don't you tell us or tell the listeners what are key takeaways that we want to walk away from this episode? Would you mind sharing?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, first, I just got to say that thanks so much for having me. I mean, who doesn't write a book and want to talk about it and share it? And especially when it gets picked up and with people that are dog tagging the pages and everything. So I love it. So thanks for the opportunity. As far as today, the book we'll get into, obviously, but this is about an amazing experience I was lucky enough to have back in my 20s, living in very remote villages in Papua New Guinea. And so, some of the takeaways here are that, life is a journey, right? This is cliche, but we're all on this personal journey, and that involves a lot of self-exploration. And I think we owe it to ourselves to pay more attention to that. I kind of stumbled onto these lessons about perspective. And the fact is we all live in a bubble. And the first step is kind of acknowledging that. And the second is really noticing in our own lives, what is that bubble? Who forms the bubble? How is that bubble being influenced? in order to see past kind of where those are healthy influences versus manipulations and things that may not be helping us. Another thing is that in Papua New Guinea, remote villages, I think it'd be no surprise to everyone here to say that they live a very simple life of amazing contentment and fulfillment for a number of reasons. But most of all, and this is what I found when I apply this, is that when we generally run into problems, we answer and solve those problems, especially in the business world, with complexity. We need complex plans and strategies and tactics to solve these problems. But oftentimes, the best solution is simplicity. So instead of putting together some big, amazing, elaborate solution to a problem, I would say always kind of question, hey, is there an actual, a pretty simple way to solve this? And let's just keep it simple, get that done, achieve those outcomes, and then move on instead of overcomplicating things. And then finally, kind of back to the personal journey space, the idea of it takes work. I think we should all allow ourselves the time and the space and the energy to put into our own personal journeys, because we actually have to be a little selfish about our own personal journeys in order to be more selfless to the rest of the world. I mean, we can't share if we have nothing to share. So I think I'm hoping that people leave maybe this session, hopefully do some reading, maybe they can find books that they might want to read, and maybe that kind of empowers them to spend a little time on themselves, because that's allowed.
I love it. That was really good. I think all of your points, I'm excited to learn how to apply them myself. I think the last one really resonates with me, and I've been trying to work through that journey as well too. When we think about, and say it a little bit different, thinking about putting my own oxygen mask on first before putting it on for others. I think that there are times when we want to lead well, it's hard to lead on empty in ways too. So I love the idea of how you shared that. So thanks for walking through that. So, all right. So you unpacked a lot in those key takeaways. You first headed to Papua New Guinea to perform research in, all right, I'm going to see if I'll make sure I don't butcher this, ethnobotany. So for our listeners who may not be familiar, what exactly is that, and why? What's your why for Papua New Guinea?
Yes,
would love to hear.
Yeah, ethnobotany is really simple. Ethno is culture, botany is plants. So ethnobotany, how cultures use plants. Now that could be everything from what plants they use for basket weaving, for different pieces of clothing, for building shelter. But for me, I was into medical ethnobotany, the plants that they were using for different illnesses and ailments that they have when they often don't have access to modern pharmaceuticals and treatments. And as far
I love it.
As far as me and Papua New Guinea and how that all happened, it was kind of interesting. I mean, I knew from a pretty young age, I had a terrible experience when my brother needed stitches, and my mom thought I wanted to be a doctor and said, "Hey, come look at your brother getting stitches." And I got a little woozy, and I was like, "Woo, that is apparently not the path for me." So at the same time, in my young age, I was debating between that and being a forest ranger. So the plants and the medicine kind of came together, again with some books that I was gifted, and there was a movie called Medicine Man with Sean Connery back in the 90s, yep. And it sounds so ridiculous, but deeply influential movie for particular audience members. So I wanted to do that, and when I got to grad school, I had a professor who said, "Hey, I'm doing work in Cambodia and Laos and Vietnam. You should start a program in Cambodia." I was like, "Sure, it doesn't matter to me where I go." And then I found out that at the time there were still about 5,000 people a year dying from landmines. And I thought, you know what? I can deal with the snakes and the spiders and the diseases and all that crazy stuff. But objects made by man to kill other men, that's when I drew the line. So Papua New Guinea was like this runner-up. I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know anyone there. But it was when you're looking for cultures that are off the grid and what plants might have good potential ailment, chemistry, you want to kind of go as far removed as possible. And so that's how I ended up finding Papua New Guinea.
I love it. So you were really intentional in this process when you made that choice, I think, to be very observant, You talk about that, about the people being and the culture that you experienced once you got there. What was your first impression when you got there? Can you tell us a little bit more about, to the listeners, about what you discussed with that, your observation of people? Would love to hear more about that context.
Their concept of time, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to say that I went and it was just embracing of the culture and their way of life, and it was just bliss. But that was not the experience at all. I was the epitome of, I was 24 at the time, and I was just this naive, arrogant American thinking, I've got a bunch of work that needs to get done. It happens to be done in this remote location. I'm just going to get in, get my work done, get out of there as soon as possible. Because, then I had to do more work back in the lab in Chicago and move on with my life, get my degree, all this kind of stuff. So this was just a little piece of the journey, even though in choosing ethnobotany, this was the most exciting piece. But I quickly kind of realized that it wasn't going to work. Pretty much every step I took, there were just a lot of real big roadblocks. And realizing I was there by myself, I didn't know anyone. It took me a little time to learn the language. And, I would find some people to help me, and I would offer kind of payment. And it was not uncommon at all that I would just be waiting for hours, sometimes days. They wouldn't even show to pick me up, to take me in a boat to a village. And then when I would find them and would kind of be like, what the heck, man? They were just, hey, let's get going. And it was driving me insane because their time, their effort, this concept of fighting for achievement, and there was no way that I could actually relay this on to these people. It just did not fit their culture. And that's when I realized, like, this culture shock thing, this wasn't like a let's meet in the middle. This was no, I need to meet them. I'm in their world. I have to completely change my mentality. And that really didn't happen until I got knocked on my butt with a really bad case of malaria.
Ooh, you want to tell us more?
So basically, I woke up in the jungle to a face really close over my face, and he was calm. It was actually freaky that he was drawing something on my forehead, and I didn't know what was happening. And I was so out of it. And he was like, "Oh, you must have fallen asleep. But don't worry, I'm putting this line of lime, this like calcium carbonate ash that they use to chew beetle net with, on your forehead, and that'll protect you from the masalai, from the evil spirits in the forest. So don't worry about it." And I was so out of it that I was like, "Sounds good, okay." And I just went back to sleep, laying in the jungle floor, knowing that there's millions of species of bugs and ants and all this kind of stuff. I don't even remember how I got back to the village. And then basically I woke up that night, and I was sweating and chills and fever and all this kind of stuff. And kind of had to come to the realization that I actually had malaria, and that if these people hadn't been there and saved me, really, that like I probably just would have been in the jungle. No one would have known. My parents never would have found out. And it was that simple if it hadn't been for these people really taking me in. And that's when it was like, I've been trying to do this kind of in spite of them, get my work done, but I need them. I'm part of this culture. And so I just embraced an entirely different mentality. I mean, it really just kind of broke the bubble wide open.
Yeah, there were like a lot of intense moments that went on in dangerous moments. Some kind of disgusting moments, where the story, and I don't want to spoil too much because I really want people to read this book, but where you almost ate something that you didn't know what it was when you put it on your plate. And when you saw what it was, it's like, I got to get this off my plate somehow, and I'm not eating it. And thankfully,
Let's just
someone
say
else was
that,
happy to eat it.
Yeah, they none of the animal goes unused. We'll just put it that way. And I saw that firsthand, apparently.
Yeah, but didn't have to experience it, so that was good. Didn't want to offend the locals, but when we're talking about some of the intense moments, and you and I talked about this before, that there's a section in the book where I'm like so emotionally attached to what is going on with you. And I told you, I was sobbing for about 4 pages. And let's say at one point you referred to yourself as, I'm going to look at my notes here, a foolish and competent fraud. And then I guess the wisdom of children, the young boy that with his friends had played soccer in front of your house, comes up and just has like a little wise conversation with you, that I don't realize he probably knew how wise he was in the moment, but helped you see. You just slowly seemed to be less frustrated as I was reading after that conversation with him. Why did that impact you that way? Why did that just like, because in a couple of pages after that, you're like, everything's going smoothly. You're on their time. Their 10:30 is what you thought was supposed to be 7:30. And today is actually 3 days from now. And you're going with the flow. Like why did that change things for you?
So I think one, as we grow up in a culture, again, kind of back to that bubble, concept, is that, it happens at a really early age. It's not like we have to look at the elders of a society and go, these are the values of this society. This is how people live. It's, these kids pick it up at such an early age. And that's when you realize this isn't contrived. This isn't artificial. Like, this just is how it is. Like, even at a young age, they have a way better sense of how all this works in their world. So, I definitely, I went through some massive imposter syndrome. I know imposter syndrome is really common. I know even in my job nowadays, I'll come across some times where I have some elements of imposter syndrome, but I have signed up to go live in remote villages in the middle of nowhere, and I have no idea what I'm doing. And I can't go home basically until I accomplish these goals, or else the whole thing was a giant waste and I don't know what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. And like, it obviously, as you can imagine, it spirals. But it kind of brings up an interesting point of, I sat down to write this book during COVID, and it was such an interesting time, the quarantine, where I feel like all of us had the bubble got disrupted, right? We're quarantined, everyone's at home, and everyone's kind of questioning, is this the right job for me? Is this the right life for me? Are my priorities, really the way I want them? And I was hearing friends and family all say this, and it was just this big reminder of, I feel like I've been through this before. Like, I already did this. And so a lot of these stories kind of kept coming up about like this culture shock, because in a way, we all went through this COVID culture shock. Mm-hmm. And so then then people would say, oh, you should write it up as a book. And I agreed to do that really on the basis of, I have 2 kids, and there's no way I'm ever going to have time to, their undivided attention to sit down and tell them all these stories. They're like, I'm not just dad that's harassing them to go brush their teeth. Like, dad had cool experiences. And so when I kind of made that decision, I realized that like, this was only going to work if I told the real story, like if I really kind of put myself out there. And thankfully, I kept lots of journals, and I had lots of emails that I had written, because there was one little spot on internet that had internet at the Shell gas station, and I would occasionally get an opportunity to go there and hope that the little dial-up worked. And I might only connect for 30 seconds. So it would literally be like, copy from Word document, paste into email, send, cross fingers, okay, hope. So I would have all these things pre-written, which meant I still had them all. And so I had all these frustrations, writing to my parents, writing to my girlfriend at the time, my friends, of just like, I'm losing my mind here and I don't know what to do. And so, yeah, there was no way that I was going to leave that out. I wasn't going to romanticize this like magical trip to the jungle, which, was the big lesson learned, I think, for me, is that I had this little fantasy since childhood, and then the reality was very, very different. But that's okay. This is how we grow and learn.
Well, speaking of imposter syndrome, I want to point out that the version of the book that I have doesn't say Ryan Case on it. Can you tell everybody why?
Yeah. A little bit of imposter syndrome, a little bit of being nervous about sharing what's a very different world than medical affairs, working in medical affairs teams. We all know how intense things could be, especially COVID. At the time, for example, we were running a phase 3 trial. We were trying to recruit a global phase 3 trial for Parkinson's disease, and no one was allowed to leave their homes. And, leadership is like, get this thing enrolled. What's going on? It's like, it's a global pandemic. And so just that super intense culture that I think some of us experience with work and COVID, where everyone doesn't know how to react. And so just getting more intense was the answer. I was really nervous. And I don't know if it was a fair nervousness or not, but the idea of finding out that, hey, one of my employees in their free time wrote a book and published it. And I was pretty nervous that, hey, maybe the first time something goes wrong, which things always go wrong, right? Anyone that's been out there working for much time at all knows that things go wrong all the time. I was really worried that it was going to be, oh, is this because you're off doing book stuff and not working? And so this balance, life and work and all that. I know we all struggle with that through COVID, and still, I think that carries on, that lingers beyond COVID and trying to readapt. But so I just decided to not use my real name and to use a pseudonym.
And I'm sorry, Chad, I think I might have cut you off.
I'm used to it, Mary. We've been
I'm glad that you
we've been friends for how long? And that's how we roll. You don't have to give me that look, though. Come on, that's pretty. That's a motherly look that you're giving me. I get those all the time.
No, see, you've been gone for a while, and I have a bunch stored up. Like when Ryan was like writing all of his emails to send later. So I've got all this stored up, and it's so.
I love it. Yeah. I love it. And I'm so glad to be back. And I can't wait for my next trip halfway across the world, apparently, Mary, so I can get more of this. No, Ryan, thanks for sharing a lot of your story. I think there's so many application points that I can hear. Can you talk a little bit more about, number one, I'm going to go back to one of the phrases that Mary talked about and used. She was talking about being a fraud, and then thinking about we are always in a constant state of hurry. We don't think about essentialism in the sense of what do we prioritize? What do we say no to where we can say yes to a lot of things? You were forced in a situation in your experience when you were in Papua New Guinea to slow down in many ways, as you were talking about. So I would love to hear more about the transferable skills that you had or that came as a result of that once you returned back to the U.S., because as far as I can tell, things have not really slowed down here in this fast and frantic pace that we always tend to run. So how did you tell us more about that? I'm curious how you made small practical application points once you returned to the U.S.
Yeah, so it's a really interesting thing. And I think it's something that doesn't get talked about very much is we all talk about culture shock of coming from our culture and going to another culture. In this case, there's this concept of return culture shock, right? This where I was in Papua New Guinea for 6 months, living in these little villages. It took me a long time to acclimate, but out of survival of both needing to get my work done and obviously, like the malaria story, literal survival, I had to acclimate to their way of living. And then over time, that became my normal. And so then I came home and it was crazy. And I still remember that feeling. I remember landing in O'Hare Airport and being like, this is madness. There are so many people and everyone is rushing somewhere. And it was crazy. And I remember my girlfriend picked me up in the car. And first off, the first thing was that when she turned on the car, the song, Hey Ya by Outkast was on. And I don't know if you remember that song, but I was like, what happened to music? Like, what is going on? And then, then after then she's pulling out And we're in Chicago traffic. And I'm like, I don't think I could handle this. I'm so glad she's driving. And she seems calm and she's asking me about the trip. And I am like white knuckling the the hand rest and stuff because I'm like, this is insane. We're all gonna die. There's like 5 cars on this massive island that I was on for 6 months. I mean, literally, you knew the 5 cars, the blue truck and the red pickup, and so so coming back, definitely then I was jumping back into my PhD program, and I had an advisor and people that are like, okay, now get it done, get it done, get it done. And as much as I did what I needed to do to get through that hurdle, there was always this kind of little voice being like, let's pay attention to what we're doing, and is this really what we want to be doing, and is this the right thing or not? And I honestly didn't realize really until COVID, until sitting down and writing the book, that it had come from this. It just sort of seemed part of me, but it happened to me, again, I was just very fortunate. It happened to me at such a young age that it just kind of got wired into who I was. For example, I was an MSL for many years, and I got offered promotions, but they always involved moving, relocating to the headquarters and going in-house. And I was from day one, and look, everyone's journey is unique, so I'm not faulting anyone. But for me, I was like, nope, I'm sorry. I was pretty transparent from the beginning that I'm interested in the role, but not if it involves going in-house. And they say, oh, this and that, and different things. But it was like, honestly, for me, at least at a time with little kids, it was like, even if headquarters is right down the street, it's just the idea of being somewhere and being committed to a location. And I had this, I guess, this sort of internal strength from this perspective in Papua New Guinea that was like, look, nothing's worth going against your values. And again, then it just comes down to us paying attention to ourselves, putting in the time to figure out what those values really are so that we can hold them dear. So, I mean, everyone has this capacity. I think I just kind of got smacked across the face with it back in a very early state. So it had seeped in.
And it seems like, that it really goes, it speaks to that second takeaway you were talking about. It's like we overcomplicate things. Maybe it's easier to make that decision, that one in particular, by going, well, this is actually a very simple decision. It's not a complex decision. I don't need to weigh pros and cons. I already know the most important things to me are these things, which makes that thing not a possibility. So, I mean, I think you referred to that as, it's Occam's razor in the book, which, I think we're all familiar with. That's the simplest answer is the right one. And it was for you.
I love the idea that, and I think that's one of the things we've talked about this the past few weeks in different ways too, about how it's important to take to prioritize your development, whatever that is, whether it's professionally or personally, and to figure out what you want. I mean, Ryan, it took me 20 years to figure out what my North Star was, in essence, from a career perspective. I've always been of the.
It was Mary. Mary was the North Star.
I'm the North Star, right?
Twinkle, twinkle, little star. That's about all I can do, Mary. But anyway, wow. My ADHD is now really kicking in. Thanks so much for that, Mary. But what I would say, Ryan, is it took me 20 some odd years to kind of figure out, okay, what, where are really my strengths and giftings, and where can I leverage those the most and enjoy? And that was a North Star for me when I started looking at different job opportunities and things like that. To your point, like you said, no, once you take the time to do that, it's easier to say no to things. But we are so, I think about growing up, I was the only child and I was a people pleaser by default, right? So whatever my parents asked me to do, I was the choir boy and this, that, and the other, just what I thought I was supposed to be versus kind of what the essence of who I really am, et cetera. And so I hear a lot of that similarities of what you're sharing as well too, is knowing what you are, knowing what you're not, knowing what you want to be, and what standards you want to hold yourself to, and letting that guide your decisions, whether it was going into and relocating and taking a home office position, et cetera, like you just mentioned. So I think that's so important to be able to prioritize those types of things. How do you do that? How do you see yourself in the midst of your job responsibilities, all that kind of stuff? Do you have practical applications that you can share a little bit about how you prioritize time, whether it's on a weekly basis? Do you do things from a quarterly look at what you've been doing and what you want to do in the future? I would love to hear any of your thoughts on that as well too.
Yeah, so I'm a bit of an organization freak. I wouldn't say I'm OCD, but when it comes to organizing, it is I always have a kind of like life goals, and then I have yearly goals, and then I have monthly goals, and then I have weekly goals, and then I have daily goals. And that this is what keeps me on top of it, because you mentioned like ADHD, like the idea that so every day I will look at the weekly thing. You have to have a lot of faith in yourself to do this, but basically it's like, look, if I've taken the time and I say this is life, this is the big picture, and this is at least for right now where I think I need to head. And that's not professionally, that's professionally as well as personally, family, all this kind of stuff. And then I break that in and I say, okay, what would make this a good year? And I'll have that divided between personal things, family things, home repair things, professional things, all these types of goals. And obviously the professional stuff changes a lot more. There's always the transition, the projects, and as things evolve, it's always moving. But then when I look at it on a week and I say, okay, this is what I need to get done this week, then I can then basically every time I wrap up a day, I have my little list for the day, which I've learned over time, like I can't be too ambitious, right? If I put 8 things down on a single day, I mean, first off, let's be real. I'm going to put 4 things down, and I'm like, if I get these 2 done, it'll be a good day. If I get these 4 done, it'll be a great day. But let's be honest, there's going to be 10 more things that pop up within the, just throughout the day that's going to derail me. So I'll add them to the list and get them taken care of. But there's this faith that like, I don't need to look at the weekly plan. I don't need to look at the yearly plan. These are little pieces that fit into the pie that I put time into, and that was the right direction. So I just kind of have to have faith that old me knew what he was doing. And so if I just get these 2 or 4 things done today, I'm good. I actually had a great colleague in the lab in grad school, and he said, if you just get one real thing done each day, you're golden. Like you'll get this done. Because a PhD program is like, you see these people that are finishing when you're starting, and you're like, it's just this book that's huge. Like, how am I going to write a 300-page dissertation? When you have all these professors that are like, take as long as you want, but the funding's going to run out, and like, it's not on us, it's your life, like whatever you want to do. And it was just about breaking it down just into big chunks, into smaller to go, oh, I just need to get this one thing done, and then I'll be all right.
Oh, I like that.
Love it.
Well, I think that we're leading in the right direction here, because I think the third takeaway is really going to be what I'm excited for you to share, which is action over theory. But before we do, I'm going to have a selfish moment, because I wanted to share a couple of the lines from the book that I really love. Again, if you're watching, I've got all of these little flags in this book of things that I'm saving them, but I did make a few notes of some I wanted to share with you guys. And one of them was a question you asked yourself earlier in the book, which was, when was the last time I only thought about the exact moment I was in? Love that one. Excuse me. And then I've got a lot here, but in the interest of time, I won't read them all. Life isn't about becoming who you think you should be. Life is about becoming who you are. And God, I love that one so much. And then this other one, we talked about this earlier, but and this was during a walk with one of the locals. When you guys were talking, you were like, I'm really uncomfortable with silence, but in this moment, I'm like, I think I'm cool with the silence. And then you said, friendship blooms in silence as much as in chatter. And I love that one too. But as Chad alluded to earlier on, some cool opportunities organically presented themselves as a result of you writing this book and having conversations with people about the book. So tell us all about that. And I'm excited for people to learn what they can do with all of this.
Thanks. So yeah, like I said, I wrote this with the premise of, okay, if I'm just going to print 2 copies myself so that each of my kids have one on a bookshelf, that's going to be considered a success for me. And the process of writing it and processing all this, and Chad, you mentioned, taking 20 years to find your North Star. Honestly, like I couldn't have written this if I had, written it the year after I came back. I needed that hindsight. I needed that perspective of like, wow, this stuff actually meant more than, just running around a jungle trying to collect plants. And so for me, when the book, I basically a publisher fell in love with it and they wanted to publish it, which was kind of beyond my wildest dreams. And then I wasn't sharing it with my world, which I did not. I thought the publisher, this was going to be a deal breaker because I was like, look, I'm not on any social media except LinkedIn, but I'm not comfortable sharing it on LinkedIn. So they were like, come on, man, you got to give us something. It was like that was the deal. Like, it went really well, and sharing it with friends and family and everything, at any rate, it kind of took a life of its own. And so it became a bestseller on Amazon, and then that got it some attention. And then a lot of people of the conversations I was having with it, and my publisher, they were kind of saying, oh, well, let's put this as like self-help. And there are a lot of like lessons learned, but it's a memoir of my experiences. I didn't write it, to be like a self-help book. But the fact is it was helping people, and they wanted to talk to me more about it. And I gave in at one point where they said, hey, you should develop like a program or like a workshop or a course. And so I started looking into it and kind of what was out there and all this, like, does the world really need, one more course? And the truth is, a lot of it kind of turned me off, especially I'm not very good at self-promotion and, like, this has all the answers and, all that, like, that's not what it is at all. And then some people, again, imposter syndrome and all that, it's like, look, I had this amazing experience, and truly, I believe that I've stumbled onto the happiest people on the planet. Not one individual or another, just an entire culture that truly had this deep sense of contentment. And they had it because they were aware of it. So that was really what was crazy about it too, is that I had done a lot of travel in South America and other developing nations and indigenous groups, leading up to this trip. And generally when they find out, oh, you're from the US, everyone gets really excited and all this. And in Papua New Guinea, they were like, oh, I'm so sorry. Do you have to go back? And I'm like, what are you talking about? It's great there. Like, I want to go back. And I remember that they had some times where they would ask me about different things in life, and just lots of gasps about what we would go through. Do people really work all the time and this and that? It's like, well, 40 hours a week. And they're like, 40 hours a week? That's insane. That's every day, all the time. And it's like, so all these things was like, oh, they really have this perspective and they're aware of it. So sharing that, and again, with the idea that, look, I don't have the answers. And these people on the island, they couldn't tell you the answers either. They found what works for them. And so the idea here is taking this journey. And that, there's all this historical reference to people that, the Aborigines would take walkabouts, and in the Amazon, and the Native Americans would do vision quests. And there were all these rites of passage that we seem to have kind of skipped over. Right now, the rite of passage is like, go to college so you have a degree so that you can get a good career. But like, I don't think, chugging, doing keg stands at a frat party is really like the rite of passage that was the old times, where it was, as much as it was this outward journey, it's really an inward journey, right? It's really about discovering who we are. And when you come back to the community, you have a much better sense of self and purpose and drive. And so the idea was, so we developed a program working with people to basically just ask a lot of tough questions, get people to actually do the activities to try to get themselves out of the bubble. Because as much as, hey, traveling the world or living in some indigenous village is going to help to get you outside that bubble, and that'll help, in general, kind of move things along, all that inward journey, that inward self-discovery, those are just kind of external factors. But this is all happening internally. We just need to put in the time and the energy to actually do it. That's the hardest part, I think, without a trip or without something that you can say, no, this is where I'm concentrating on myself. So this is really, so we basically figured out a way to just virtual workshops in small groups, working with people and coaching people on just on a lot of these, asking the right questions and doing exercises and running activities to figure out exactly what is our North Star. There's a lot of people that haven't found it. And I would argue that it's probably just because they haven't put in the time and the energy and the effort to actually say, I'm allowed to figure this out. Like, it's okay. I don't have to worry about what's productive and my to-do list and all these other things. Just, we're allowed to focus on what matters. And you guys were talking about professional development. I don't think there's a difference between personal development and professional development. I think work-life balance is this broken concept where the people use when they're like, oh, I hate working past 5 p.m. But at the same time, it's really awesome that, hey, I can check email at 8 p.m. and I can catch my kid's soccer game at 2 in the afternoon versus I used to not be able to do that. But like, I would choose that because that's important to me. So we each have to figure out what that life work harmony really is. We have to ask ourselves these tough questions. And so yeah, I'm just really excited to be able to share that with people. Again, not from the perspective that I'll tell you everything you wanted to know and here's the secret to happiness. Not at all, because it's absolutely different for everyone. And therefore, I would argue anyone who tells you they have the answers is clearly just blowing smoke.
So tell it, what's the name of the program?
So the program really officially, so the program is the Modern Odyssey program, but it's really the WILD method, which is basically an acronym for Willful Independence, Live Deliberately. And that's really what it's about. It's about recognizing your perspective, all the influences that are on us all the time, and becoming willfully independent of that so that we individually can figure out how we want to live deliberately. And Chad, like just what you were saying with the North Star, like once you have that, honestly, a lot of these things become so much easier. If we don't have that, then every time there's a big decision, I don't know what to do, I don't know how to decide. We ask our friends and family, but sometimes that's good, but that's just information. They have their own values and desires and maybe even ulterior motives and things. But if we are really centered to all that, then it makes those decisions a lot easier because we just align it with the path that we're on.
And so how can people find out about the program? Share the website and all of that good stuff.
So the website is forgethappy.com. Which seems maybe a little counterintuitive.
So catchy. Well, so catchy. I love it.
I'm not a fan. Everyone's talking about happiness, and I think we missed the boat somewhere along the line. The Dalai Lama was the one that said it, but I piggybacked it 1,000 times. Is happiness is like a butterfly. It's flitting around and fluttering around, and it's really beautiful, and appreciate it while it's there. But if you go chasing it, you're just going to drive yourself crazy. Versus if we really make decisions and we focus on contentment, fulfillment, deep satisfaction, these are like the baseline, right? This is the high tide that raises all ships. This is the 3 a.m. you wake up, and instead of worrying about all the what ifs and the to-do list and all the stresses, you're just a little bit more relaxed, recognizing that you have confidence of your place in the world. You know who you authentically are, and therefore, the rest of it falls into place. So forgethappy.com. The book, as you say, is Wild Happy. It's available on Amazon. And actually on LinkedIn, I posted a link through my publisher to get discounted copies. But so maybe I don't know if you guys share this in show notes or
Yeah,
things like that.
absolutely.
So we'll give the listeners the discount too.
Oh, super.
This has been so good, Ryan. Thanks for sharing your journey. And I would say you're right. We don't have all the answers, and I think that and we don't. Even when Mary and I were thinking about starting the podcast, I mean, we dealt with like, golly, I don't have much to offer. I don't know. And I think one of the things that we've heard from listeners is just hearing life experiences and how they can apply them in their own ways. Not necessarily here's a clear method to do it, but hey, look, I'm struggling with this, or I have struggled, and here's what I've done with this, and what are some transferable skills with it. So I am so thankful that you took the leap to be able to put some of these things together to share your story. Your story is just as important as anybody else's, and doesn't mean that you're going to impute it on others and it's the clear method, but you're giving a roadmap for people to consider. They have to make the choice to do it or not, or not do it. Right. So I love the humility that you share, but, your story is just as important. It is more important than you're giving credit for, I think, in ways too. So thanks for your willingness to go there. I mean, when many people would dismiss that and say, no, I have nothing really to give. But you did it with the intent of trying to invest in your kids first. Right. And so I think that's, I think that's one of and that wasn't even one of your takeaways, I don't think. I mean, but the essence of is if you prioritize the things that matter, well, I guess it does, that matter most, which your kids and investment in your kids is what mattered most. And as a result, some of these other things came from it. And it's going to touch people's lives in ways that you may have not intentionally done in the very beginning, but it's a nice byproduct, and it's because you're following a passion and a pursuit that you were able to identify and you stepped into. So thank you for that. Thank you for hopping on today and sharing your journey with us. I am really encouraged by the things that you shared. I think our listeners are going to love this as well too. We'll make sure they definitely have more follow-up discussion, want to be able to look at the resources. We'll definitely make sure that those are available to them as well too. Any final things you'd like to share with us, Ryan?
Well, honestly, I think you really nailed it. I think if we could boil this all down to one simple thing, I think what would be most effective for everyone is to shift to a mindset of an explorer. You know, a lot of us are chasing and we're racing and we're running as fast as we can. But the truth is, the difference is an explorer doesn't know what they're going to find. That by definition, right? They're off to discover something. And the cliche of life is a journey, not a destination is really cute. And everyone says it, but it's hard when we're so goal oriented and milestone oriented and everything. But if we can shift to sort of, we're going to enjoy the journey and just explore, and every discovery is going to pivot it in ways that we don't know how it's going to turn out, but just kind of enjoy the ride. I mean, my gosh, the world will be a better place. And a lot of that starts with saying, I don't know. I don't know where this is going. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know everything. And so I think the world needs a healthy dose of humility. So I'm certainly I'm flattered that you would think that maybe I'm doling it out in small doses.
I love it. Keep curious, Ryan. I think that's a challenge for all of us, right? Is to keep the curiosity alive. That's what drives us as scientists, quite honestly, in many ways, if we can boil that all down. So thanks so much again for joining us. Better person for being able to hear your story. So thank you with that. Listeners, thank you so much again for hopping on and joining us on our leadership journey. Remember that leaders don't develop in isolation. Leaders develop from other leaders, and we are glad that we are learning together here on MSL Lead Chronicles. Until next time, have a great one and continue to learn well. Take care.